Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews and Happy Pride, everyone. So this video is called Language and how we use it within the LGBTQ community. And it's a part of my Pride Month celebration, although I typically do 1 to 2 videos per month anyways about my transition or trans issues in general. But this month is special. I'll be doing a little bit more. So there's this video, and then next week on June 17th, I will be releasing a video called What Pride Means to Me. And if you are a subscriber and you've seen my calendar video, you may have noticed that that video was labeled as my trans life update, my HRT update, which is what I do every month. And I probably will do a little bit of that too in that video, but I actually decided to make that the What Pride Means to Me video, and that's coming from a perspective who is new to Pride, or at least the Pride celebrations, because this will be my first year getting to celebrate since I've come out, because the last year that it was in person was 2019, and that was before I came out. So I'm going to be talking about that in the video on the 17th. And then on the 20th, I'll be doing a live stream just kind of talking about my experience at the different Pride celebrations that I will have gone to over that weekend. And I'm also doing a special version of Nostalgia Lane. Nostalgia Lane is a series of videos I do every month where I review a film from my childhood or from my young adulthood in some cases, 20 years ago or more. I'm in my late 40s. So this month I'm doing But I'm a Cheerleader, and I can't wait to rewatch that film and talk about it. So subscribe if you are not a subscriber, and you can get all of that stuff this month. So back to this video. I want to focus in on 3 particular phrases or terms that are used both within and without the queer community. The first 2 are actually coming from within the queer community. The last one is coming from transphobes and their misperception of how language is used. But I find this subject really, really fascinating, especially as someone who is just now integrating herself into the LGBTQ community, since I came out during COVID, during the lockdowns. So I'm finally now getting to start to integrate, at least in person. I was able to integrate online and Reddit message boards and Facebook message boards, but that's not the same thing. As far as interpersonal interactions, and I'm finding some interesting things both online and in person with language and how we use it in certain terms and phrases that I find very interesting. And I don't necessarily think there's always a clear-cut answer to what's right and what's wrong, except for the third thing that I'm going to talk about, which is a misperception coming from transphobes. I do think there's an objective right and wrong in that case. But in a lot of cases, I don't know whether it's so cut and dry, and I find it very, very interesting. And this is just something I'm kind of learning about as I am starting to integrate myself into the community. All right, so there's going to be 3 words or phrases that I'm going to talk about. And so let's start with the first one. I'm going to talk about the word queer itself. Okay, so this first topic comes from a comment that I got on a video I did a couple months ago. The video was called Transphobia from Within the Queer Community and mostly dealt with lesbian TERFs. But I got this comment from a person who identified himself as a gay man. And I'll read the comment to you. He said, "The term queer, in quotes, makes me cringe uncontrollably. Being a gay man, this is pretty much just a slur that's been co-opted by people who aren't us and then gets used back at us for the most part. It is really extremely unpleasant." And in the video that he's commenting on, I refer to this community as the queer community several times. So I had to take pause when I read this comment. I didn't reply to it because I didn't know how to walk that tightrope of respectfully disagreeing with something that he said in there without invalidating his feelings, because this is clearly a person who has some very strong negative feelings associated with that word. I'm just going to go ahead and make a guess that this person is likely my age or even a little bit older. So I came of age in the 80s and early 90s. I'm going to guess this is a more of a 70s and 80s person, or possibly an 80s and early 90s person as well, because I think that was the age where queer was definitely a slur, right up there with fag and fairy and whatever other ones that you can think of. Fag was the most common one that I remember hearing growing up, and queer was another one. And for me personally, I hadn't figured out who I was yet. I didn't figure out what my identity was. But hearing those slurs used against gay people made me not want to associate any way with gay people or transsexuals or transvestites, or the terms that I would heard that would more apply to me. It made me terrified of being associated with those groups of people because of slurs like that and just how they were treated. So this particular individual who wrote the comment probably has some very specific experiences with that word in his time that make him cringe uncontrollably even today. And I don't want to invalidate that. I think those feelings are valid, and I don't know what his experience is. I didn't live his experience, so who am I to judge? I can't say that you shouldn't cringe uncontrollably, because your experience is what your experience is, and you're going to have certain associations and feelings about certain words or phrases, and there's one that bothers me that I'm going to talk about in part 2 of this video. So I don't want to invalidate anyone's feelings. Those feelings are valid, those feelings are real. However, I have to respectfully disagree that it's just a slur that's been co-opted with people who aren't us and then gets used back at us. I gotta say, as I am integrating into the community, I hear queer used all the time by, almost exclusively by people who identify in that community. In fact, you know, we call it LGBTQ now, or LGBTQ plus, or LGBTQIA, or there's a whole bunch of different versions. I wish we could all agree on one acronym, but it is pretty common now that Q is a part of that acronym. Stands for queer, so I'm gonna say that it's kind of us who's using that. I just listened to just a recent example. I was just today listening to a podcast on Post Show Recaps, which is a podcast channel that I listen to a lot. And they were doing a top 10 LGBTQIA films of all time. And one of the individuals on this podcast used the word or the phrase queer community about 500 times. This is a person who identifies within that community. That's just one example. I do online dating a lot, so I'm looking at other people who identify in that community, and I see people in their profiles constantly calling themselves queer. I hear it all the time. I hear people referring to themselves as queer all the time. So from my perspective, it looks like the community has kind of taken control of that word, taken ownership of that word, and taken away its power. I never hear that used as a slur personally anymore. It was more used back in the day. Now I've exclusively hear it again and 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 again, constantly by people who identify as lesbian, gay, trans, bi, whatever, something within that community. I only hear it coming from people within that community. So I'm going to respectfully disagree that it's a word used against us, because that's not what I see. Granted, I am a person who is just integrating into the community, as I said before, and this person speaking, I have a feeling he has been integrated into the community for a very long time. So I don't want to invalidate his feelings, but I'm also not going to stop using that word, since why would I be the only one to stop using that word when everyone else does? So I wouldn't know what to say to this person, which is why I didn't respond. I don't want to say like, oh, you just need to get over it, because that's not true. That's invalidating his feelings. But you do have to come to a certain level of acceptance that that word is used regularly by us, by trans, lesbian, gay, bi, everybody else in the acronym, which includes the acronym Q. The letter Q is part of the acronym. So I don't know what to say, but I find it very interesting. I found this person's perspective very interesting, and it made me take pause and really think about the language that we use. And that's why I wanted to talk about it in this video. Okay, so now I want to talk about a phrase that I have heard in recent months that really rubs me the wrong way. So I can identify with the individual who is really bothered by the term queer, even though it is used by the rest of the community. Because the phrase that I'm thinking of apparently originated with non-binary individuals, although I personally haven't heard it used by such individuals. I've only heard it used by cis people, but they assure me that it comes from non-binary individuals, and that is female presenting or male presenting. But that term makes me cringe uncontrollably. It really bothers me because for me, when I hear that as applied to me, that I am merely presenting as female, I'm not actually female, and that's what it feels like. And for those of you who just heard me say that and go, well, you're not female because female means you were born with certain biological parts, you're objectively wrong. And that's actually the subject of my third part of this video, where I'm going to talk about the terms female and male versus woman and man, and as they apply to your biological sex that you were born with, the body parts and that you were born with, versus your gender identity. That's the subject of number 3. So if you think me saying I'm female is wrong, then you are wrong, and I'm going to explain that in part 3. Anyways, I don't like female presenting because it makes it sound like I'm a pretender. But supposedly it comes from the non-binary individuals who I guess wouldn't really fit into when someone says male or someone says female, that they don't fit into either one of those, so that they would prefer female presenting, because if they were born female and they look more female, then they'll fit into that category. And this comes from my work. Supposedly a non-binary individual at my work, who I don't work with, I don't know this person, was overheard referring to themselves as female presenting, and so it was assumed that, okay, that's the proper term. And then I had another person at my work, separate from that, use the term and say that she specifically knows 2 non-binary people, friends of hers, that prefer those terms, female presenting or male presenting. That was a little surprising to me, because I thought if you were non-binary, you didn't necessarily want to be associated with one or the other. But at the same time, I do understand that if someone just says male and female, it doesn't include you. So I get that, wanting to have something more inclusive. I really need to have a conversation with a person who prefers those terms. So if you happen to be watching this and you prefer those terms, let's just have a discussion in the comments, because I'm just really curious where you're coming from. But for me, where I'm coming from is that that just makes me cringe. Like, it bugs the crap out of me, because it makes it sound like I'm only presenting as female and that I'm not actually. So it really bugs me. And it's coming from well-meaning cis folk. They're trying their best. I know cis people, it is really hard to figure out what the best language to use is, because you can say one thing that one person over here within the community wants you to use, and another person on the other side of the community says, no, don't use that. So I know it's tough. It's kind of hard within the community too. I guess we need to agree on language. I don't think we can really even agree on the acronym. It seems to me, I've seen so many different versions of it. I prefer personally the LGBTQ plus. I know that leaves out some people, but how long do we want to make this acronym? Like, it's already a mouthful. So I don't know. It's tough to come up with it. I can see why there's disagreement with that as well. And I very rarely have seen the letter P in the acronym, which would stand for pansexual. So I feel like if anyone's going to be in it, they should be too. But I don't know. It's hard. See, this is hard. So cis people, straight people, if you're watching this and you think language is hard, I think it's hard for us too, especially for those of us who are, recently come out and trying to integrate into the community. So I don't know what's right and what's wrong in this situation. I just know how it makes me feel. But I also would want to listen to the feelings of anyone who prefers that terminology. But I have yet to speak to a person like that. I've only spoken to cis people who claim that people within the community prefer that terminology. I need to speak with someone who is within the community that prefers that terminology and see where they're coming from, because maybe that would make me feel better about my feelings. I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Then I'll deal with it when I hear people using the term female presenting. But it's like nails on the chalkboard. I will tell you, I do not like it. All right, so there's that. Now let me go ahead and get into what I just teased. I want to get into the terminology female and male versus man and woman, and how that applies to both, what you were born as and your gender identity. Okay, this last part, just like the first part, comes from a comment of the same video. It was the video I did on transphobia within the queer community, and ironically, I got transphobia from within the queer community commenting. It was definitely a TERF, although I misunderstood the comment at first. I thought it was someone who was trying to be an ally and was just maybe misunderstanding some things, and it turned out, oh no, you're a TERF. Okay, I see. If I know it's a TERF or a transphobe, they comment on my videos, I just delete them. You will never see them. I will not respond because I do not want to give them a platform, number one. And number two, I don't think it's really worth engaging a person like that. I think it's well worth engaging a person who just has never met a trans person and maybe has just heard different things from Fox News or just their neighbors or whoever, and just have the wrong impression. But if they were actually to meet a trans person or listen to a trans person, they could be persuaded. Those are the people that I would engage with. But people who have already decided in their hatred and their bigotry, they are just going to always twist whatever you say to fit their narrative. And that's what this person ended up doing. And so this person came on and was commenting on the fact that I had referred to myself in that video as female, completely ignoring the substance of the entire point of the video, but hyper-focused on that fact. And I'm not going to read the comment verbatim because I just don't want to. But basically what they were saying is that I am not female because I was born with male parts. I'm a trans woman, so they were willing to accept that I'm a woman, just not female. And that's kind of why I thought it was an ally who was just kind of a little ignorant, because they seemed willing to accept, okay, you're a trans woman, but you're not female because you weren't born with the right parts to be female. And this person continued on, when you trans people say things like that, it just perpetuates people's belief that you're insane, that you're just delusional. So basically what she was saying is female and male refer to the parts that you were born with, whereas man and woman refers to your gender identity. And actually, I watched one video where a trans man was speaking and used that same logic. So I think within the community, it's also, this misunderstanding also exists. So I was trying to explain to this person why their definition of female was wrong. And again, they just took what I said and fit it into their narrative. And their last comment, which I did end up deleting because I was done with this person, their last comment was about how delusional I am and it's cognitive dissonance and all of this stuff, because they were reading what I was saying as I am the equivalent of a cis woman. I am the same thing as a person who was born with different body parts. And that is never at all what I was saying. They just completely ignored what I was actually saying and twisted my words to fit their own personal narrative. What I was actually saying is the word female does not mean what you think it means. I would never claim, and I don't think there's any trans woman who would ever claim, that we are the same as cis women. When we say trans women are women, we mean we are a different type of women than cis women. We're all under the greater umbrella, the large category of women, and there's different types of women. There's also intersex women, people who were born intersex but still identify as women. I mean, there are obviously differences. On the one hand, I do not get periods. I do not bleed. I do not get PMS in the same way, although I think the hormones that I take do affect me in similar ways. I don't get periods every month, though not every cis woman does either, just to be clear. But generally speaking, that is one difference. On the other side, a difference is that cis women don't have the experience of having to pretend to be male for a good part of their lives. They don't know what that feels like. So there are differences, but we're all women. We're just cis women and trans women all under the greater umbrella of women. And no one would ever say that we are the exact same thing as cis women. That is never what I was saying. And this person was just so insistent that that was my argument, and it never actually was. So here is my real argument. The word female and male refer to gender identity just as much as they refer to the parts that you were born with. And for proof of that, you need only look at my driver's license, which has a gender marker of F for female. And the reason why it has that is because I show them my court documents where I got my legal name and sex change. Now that is a little problematic where the state is calling it sex when really it should be gender identity. So they're kind of getting their language a little confused. But I'm legally recognized as female when I fill out any paperwork and it asks you male or female. And these days you are getting to see other or even non-binary. I think if I were non-binary, I would prefer non-binary over other personally. But you see those. I check the box for female because that's what my driver's license says. That is what my court document says. I am legally recognized by the state of Oregon in these here United States as female. So I would beg to differ that I don't get to call myself that when I am legally recognized as that. And that does not mean that I was born with a vagina. And it does not mean that I am saying that I have the same experience as a person who was born with a vagina, because obviously I don't. I was never saying that. It just means that the words female and male refer to gender identity every bit as much as they refer to your biological parts. And if you want more proof, we turn to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, just at least the online version. You look up the definition of female. There's actually several different definitions. So 1A is of relating to or being the sex that typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs. Relating to, I don't know exactly what that means there. I'm not sure if that includes us or not, because I don't just relate to being female. But then we get number 2, which is having to do with flowers, like botany, having or producing only pistils or pistillate flowers. And then definition B, having a gender identity that is opposite of male. Very, very clear. So when you say that I'm not female, Merriam-Webster Dictionary disagrees with you, because one of the definitions is very clear that female refers to gender identity every bit as much as it refers to your biological sex. Like, what do you want me to do when I'm filling out these forms? I'm supposed to put male? That's just going to be lying. That's going to give them the wrong information. That doesn't make any sense. Especially when I'm legally recognized as female. So that's what I was trying to say to this person, but then I just gave up because they were just so insistent. That's why I don't usually argue with TERFs, because they just have their own narrative, and no matter what you say, they're going to just fit that into your narrative and not actually listen. So much of the world's problems can be solved if we just listened to each other. If people were to just listen to trans people, just listen. And a lot of people do. And those are the people who are worth engaging in conversation. If they are willing to listen and hear what you have to say and actually get to know you and see that you're not a monster. Those are the people worth engaging with. But people who just are going to take every word you say and put it in their narrative, that's just not worth engaging with. So I just want to make that clear. Male and female are terms that refer to gender identity every bit as much as they refer to your biological body parts that you were born with. All right. So that does it for this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope it was somewhat interesting. Please leave some comments below, and let's discuss this. And, if I get transphobic or terrific comments, you're deleted, because it's just not worth engaging with you. You're just going to take whatever I say and put it into your narrative. But anyone who wants to have an actual rational discussion, let's do that in the comments. Also, please join me next week. As I said earlier, I'm going to be doing a video on what pride means to me, and this is from the perspective of someone who is just kind of now entering into the community and experiencing pride for the first time, because I was always an outsider watching it. So, subscribe if you have not already. Hit that like button, bell for notification, all those things, and I will see you really soon, everyone. Have a good day. Goodbye.